Welcome to AIGP News. I'm Steve Sanders. In this week's top story, Bahrain officials fired on protesters this week. For those of you wondering, Bahrain is a country that's somewhere on the map, we think. This came after protesters in Bahrain marched on Pearl Square, protesting their government's rule. The protesters reportedly wanted to change the name of the country to something people would remember. President Obama condemned the use of violence on protesters, saying they were just peaceful protesters. Obama then bragged that he quit smoking, keeping one of his campaign promises. The United States vetoed a UN agreement this week that would stop Israeli settlements from being built, which comes as no surprise to anyone. The UN bill passed, though, even though it is said that the veto from the United States would anger Islamic allies. So for those of you wondering, President Obama and the United States can not only piss off their own people, but they can piss off people in other countries. Way to go. A former juvenile court judge this week was found guilty of racketeering charges. It is said that when he was a judge, he'd purposely send juveniles to for-profit centers and take kickbacks. This is a brilliant plan, actually, and it might help the federal government recover some of our debt. Let's call them. I'm on hold. This juvenile court judge could face up to 12 years in prison now, but luckily he'll be sent to an adult prison. Though, badly for him, because most of the juveniles he put away are now adults in prison. Because Intel takes the products it makes overseas, sells them for profits, and then donates some money to Americans' education. The Dow Jones Industrial Average spent a third week up this week, bringing celebration from all the employed people on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has only been down for 3 days in February, and this week it was brought back up by profits from McDonald's. McDonald's, seriously, they're not an industry, they're fast food. Not an industry like Ford. Oh, no. According to a new study, speaking 2 languages will help delay Alzheimer's, proving once again we spend way too much money funding research on weird things. This new study also said that babies can decipher between 2 languages based on lip and mouth movement, which brings good news to babies everywhere. A TV reporter who lapsed into gibberish while covering the Grammys has said it wasn't a stroke. She was just trying to speak to babies who may be watching TV. Her doctors reportedly said that it was not a stroke, but a migraine which can mimic stroke symptoms, unlike when I lapse into gibberish, which is a stroke. A woman accused of threatening to reveal her sexual tryst with coach Rick Pitino, I think that's how you say his name, I don't really care, with Rick Pitino, unless he paid her millions of dollars, was sentenced Friday to 7 years in prison, meaning her next sexual tryst will be with her roommate Stabby. Stabby is a Pisces who enjoys long walks on the beach, playing cards, lifting weights, and shanking people in the laundry room. The woman cried intermittently during her sentencing and gave an incoherent speech, and millions of people wondered whether it was a stroke or a migraine. Now here's a report from our own Big R. Take it away, Big R. Yo, 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 this is Big R in the house, homies. And my peeps, my homies, Big R here to talk to you about Belgium. Now, Belgium is a country in Europe. Big R here to talk to y'all about Belgium. Belgium is a country in Europe. And this country is amazing. It's filled with waffles. It's filled with weed. It's filled with everything Big R likes in life. But Big R not here to talk to you about waffles or weed. What Big R is here to talk to you about is that Belgium has went over 200 days without a government. It's amazing. Now the Belgian people, they know there's no government. And you know what they're doing? They're celebrating. No, not because there's no government. They're celebrating because they made the world record books for most days without a government. Big R says that's amazing. But you know something else that's amazing? Governments and the chaos theorists would have you believe that the people would loot, would riot, would kill each other, destroy towns, and everything else if there was no government. And that clearly is not what's happening here. What's happening is there's no government and the people are going to work. They're going home. They're making dinner. They're not rioting. They're not looting. They're not destroying. They're not pillaging. They're not killing or stabbing or fighting or anything else. They're living their lives like it was normal. Like normal government is no government. This is amazing. This is truly amazing. And you know why? Because it's the exact opposite that the governments tell you. The governments tell you that you need them, that they know what's best, that they know what's right, that they know what's wrong. And without them, you'd go crazy. But Belgium is proving that's not true. That without government, people go to work, people go to school, people go home, people eat dinner. People don't riot and loot and kill and stab and fight and kill and pray. They go to work. They go to school. They ultimately live their lives like there was a government. So America, my peeps, my homies, my people, we need to remember this. We need to take a page out of Belgium history. And we need to say, listen, we don't need the government making our decisions. We don't need Big Brother telling us what to do. We don't need someone over our shoulder telling us what we can and cannot do, because we can live without a government. We know what's good. We know what's bad. And we can survive and get by without Big Brother. And so my peeps, my homies, you need to remember this. And we need to tell the government, we don't need you over our shoulder, because we can make our own decisions and we can live our own lives. Now we do need limited government. We do need police. We do need fire. We do need hospitals. We do need schools. But we don't need seatbelt laws, because we're going to wear the seatbelt anyways. We don't need airbag laws, because they're going to put the airbags in the car anyways. We need limited government and not full-blown big government. And that's all Big R's got to say. So back to Steve Sanders in the studio. Thank you, Big R. That was very informative. Now for celebrity news. Jermaine Jackson's ex is looking for buyers on a reality show starring her and her children. Well, no buyers have come forward yet. I'm sure someone will buy this, no matter how stupid, idiotic, pointless, or completely insane it is. She claims she needs the money from this reality show for her children because their fathers do not pay child support. This is really not, a black man not paying child support is really not news. But that's what we're here to report on. What's not really news. It's being reported that Frankie Muniz, in his 911 call earlier this week, said that he was a celebrity. Wow. He's really using the term celebrity loosely. I mean, maybe 10 years ago when Malcolm in the Middle was on. Wait. I was the only person who watched that show. So no, he was never really a celebrity. Lindsay Lohan was reportedly angry at her mom for doing an interview on Good Morning America this week. Wow, that just proves you don't have to do anything to get an interview on Good Morning America. David Archuleto's record label has dropped him. You might remember David Archuleto from, you may not remember David Archuleto, which may be why his record label dropped him. Pretty Wild star Tess Taylor is checked out of rehab, reminding us all that there is apparently a show called Pretty Wild, and its star is Tess Taylor. Former Alice in Chains bassist, former Alice in Chains bass player, Mike Starr was arrested this week for having in his possession 2 bottles of prescription drugs. This coincides with his agent's plan to get his client's name back in the news. Mike Starr reportedly tried the whole "do you know who I am" routine to police officers. This routine, which if I found out anything in my time doing this show, does not work. Which is why if you're in the Dayton, Ohio area, you can see me live picking up trash by the side of the road. This is a free show, but donations are appreciated. LeBron James is set to make his acting debut. He is set to play a conceited superstar basketball player in Ballers. This is a stretch for LeBron James, who... Okay, this is not a stretch for LeBron James at all. Well, here's a special report by me, reporting on a new formula I've created to determine the greatest tag teams in WWF history. Take it away, me. Thank you, me. As I said, I've created this formula to determine the greatest tag teams in WWF history. Now, the reason this formula was created was I was watching YouTube videos on who the greatest tag teams were in the WWF. And I found most of these YouTube videos were pretty much popularity contests, which I thought was biased and unfair. They also mainly included tag teams from the 80s and 90s, forgetting about the post-80s eras of tag teams, which there actually were some good tag teams. And, well, the 80s and 90s and early 2000s were some of the best tag team wrestling of all time. There were also great tag teams in the 70s and the 60s when the tag team titles were around. So that's why I created this formula. It's a mathematical formula to determine the greatest tag teams. I ultimately was pleased with the results of this formula. It showed a variation of tag teams through the different WWE eras who could be the greatest, and had a variation of listings from pretty much the 70s on. A tag team was listed. I don't remember having any from the 60s, though I may have. I'm not really sure. Well, this formula goes as this. There are 2 variables in this formula. There's R, which is the number of which stands for the number of title reigns. Which means if they had it once, they have 1 R. If they have twice, they have 2 R, and so on and so forth. R is 1 for 1 title reign, R is 2 for 2 title reigns, and so on and so forth. There is also T, which stands for time, and the time is measured in 3-month increments. So every 3 months is pretty much 1 point. Due to the fact that I found tag title reigns from the 60s onward were all relatively short. There was never like someone holding the tag titles for 30 years like there was in the world or women's or so on and so forth. So we could really use it in 3-month increments because there are no really long championships that lasted 5 or 6 years. So it goes as this. Pre-1989, which is before 1989, is 2R, which is 2 points, pretty much, for every 1 reign, plus T. So T is 1 for every 3 months. So in the case of some tag teams who had 2 title reigns, that would be 4 points for title reigns, and they held it for a total of, I don't know, let's say 9 months, that would be 3 points. So they'd have a total of about 7 points, which wasn't bad. From 1989 till 2000, it was just R plus T. Number of title reigns plus 1 point for every 3 months, which worked out pretty well. And then, because after 2000, there was a great number of multiple reigns. Like the Dudley Boys, who had 8 reigns. And if we would have went with that, 8, I mean, if they held it for, 6 months during those 8 reigns, they would have automatically had 10 points and been in the top 10. So we had to modify the formula past 2000. We had to cut the number of reigns down half point. So it's 1/2 R plus T, which is the time. And I said, this gave a varying list from the numbers. And ultimately, you're wondering who the number 1 team is. It was the Dudley Boys. I wasn't entirely pleased with the list because there's still a great point differential between the teams in the 70s and the teams in the 2000s. It was a good point differential, not a great point differential. So the formula could still be tweaked a little bit. I'm not entirely sure how to tweak it. So if you have suggestions, here's the formulas. Tweak it, see what you can come up with. Now, the reason this is being on the news show is I've decided to do a wrestling show on Thursdays instead of children's questions. Because with children's questions, the problem being, we don't get any children's questions. I have to go on the internet. I have to find children's questions. It takes me 2 hours to write a 3-minute thing. As I said, we don't get any children's questions. No one sends us any children's questions. I have to find children's questions, which is a pain in the butt. And I've also decided to do this because I like wrestling. I'm a lifelong fan of wrestling. And I found most wrestling commentators on YouTube are not knowledgeable in pro wrestling, or not as knowledgeable as I am for the different eras and character development and stuff like that I am. So I've decided to do it. So it will be on Thursdays, starting tomorrow, because this goes up on Wednesdays. For those of you wondering, we shoot this on Saturdays. So if something happened on Sunday and it's not in here, that's because we shoot on Saturdays. And it gets edited on Sundays. So, as I said, it'll be up on tomorrow, or the day after this goes up, Thursday. And that will be the first one. I will be talking about The Undertaker. I will explain why in that video. So that's all I have. Back to me in the studios. Thank you, me. Now for sports news. Carmelo Anthony and New York Knicks owner James Dolan met this week in what has to be the most boring basketball news ever. Dennis Rodman is one of 12 finalists set to go into the Hall of Fame, proving to us once again how much integrity the Basketball Hall of Fame has. Mark Cuban has started a new football company called Radical Football. It is said to be a lot like the XFL, which means it will have big build and will ultimately fail miserably. The Indianapolis Colts have released former Defensive Player of the Year and Pro Bowler Bob Sanders. Bob Sanders will probably go to the Cincinnati Bengals, where he will play solidly for 1 season and then be released. Jim Edmonds has announced his retirement from baseball. Edmonds was known for hitting home runs, making spectacular catches, and playing almost as well as Jim Edmonds. Former Bears and Notre Dame player Dave Duerson was found dead at his home this week. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Dave Duerson's family. We would send them out to Bears and Notre Dame fans everywhere, but they are used to sad and disappointing news. Now, here are this week's basketball scores. That's all the time we have for this week. I'm Steve Sanders, signing off.